The Silent Visitor. Chapter 1. The Stranger's Offer. Anna's house sat quietly on the edge of a forgotten cul-de-sac, tucked away from the noise of the world. Its aging Victorian architecture cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn, especially on nights like this when the wind howled through the cracked windows. Anna Blake, a single mother of one, was restless as she peered through the kitchen window, absent-mindedly rubbing her son Dylan's jacket. He was staying at her sister's place for the weekend, and the house felt impossibly still without him. The clock chimed, a soft, hollow sound that bounced off the bare walls. She had never felt this isolated, not since Dylan's father had walked out on them 2 years ago. She sighed, deciding to make herself some tea, hoping the warmth would settle her nerves. That was when the knock came at the door. It was firm, but not too aggressive, like someone who knew they needed to be heard, but didn't want to cause alarm. Anna's heart quickened. No one ever came here, especially not at this time of night. With a slight hesitation, she moved toward the door, her hand hovering over the lock. She opened it. A man stood there, late 40s, clean-cut but with an unsettling presence about him. His eyes were piercing, cold, but there was something else, something Anna couldn't quite place. He wore a long trench coat, the collar turned up against the wind. His face barely moved as he spoke. "Miss Blake, right? Anna Blake." She nodded slowly, gripping the door tighter. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Dr. Malcolm Hart," he said, extending his hand, though she didn't take it. "I'm a psychologist. I work with children, troubled children. I think we need to talk about your son." Anna's breath caught in her throat. "Dylan? Why? What do you mean?" The man's expression softened, or at least it seemed to. "I know this sounds strange, but I've been working with children like him for years. Kids who see things they can't explain." Anna's blood ran cold. Dylan had been having nightmares for months, waking up screaming about people in his room. People no one else could see. At first, she thought it was just a phase, but lately, the things he described seemed disturbingly real. He's been seeing. Anna trailed off, unsure how to even say it out loud. "The dead," Malcolm finished for her. His words hung heavy in the air, and Anna instinctively took a step back. "Look, I know you're scared. I've helped kids like Dylan before. It's not too late." Anna's hand began to shake, the weight of his words pressing down on her. How could this stranger know so much? How could he know about the things she had barely admitted to herself? "You're not alone in this," Dr. Hart added, his voice now softer, almost reassuring. "Let me help." Anna's head spun. She didn't know what to think, what to believe. "How do I know I can trust you?" Malcolm's eyes flickered with something she hadn't noticed before, pain, or maybe guilt. "Because I've seen them too." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She couldn't breathe. She felt dizzy, the world around her tilting as if the ground itself was betraying her. This was madness. It had to be. But something deep inside her whispered otherwise. Curious about what Dr. Hart will reveal? Subscribe to see what Anna discovers about her son's dark gift and the doctor's chilling past. Chapter 2. The Unseen Ones. Anna stared at Dr. Hart, her mind racing, her heart pounding. Could this really be happening? Could Dylan truly be seeing the dead? And what about this man, this stranger who had appeared on her doorstep, claiming to understand it all? It felt like something out of a nightmare, a dark, twisted dream she couldn't wake up from. Still, she found herself stepping aside, allowing Malcolm to enter the house. He walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something. Anna closed the door behind him, feeling a strange chill sweep through the house. "I know this is a lot to take in," Malcolm said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "But I've dealt with this kind of thing before. I've seen how it affects families." "How?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How can you be so sure?" Malcolm hesitated, glancing around the room again before speaking. Because I lost someone too. A child, just like Dylan. My son. Anna froze. She hadn't expected that. The weight of his confession settled in the air between them, thick and heavy. I'm sorry, she said softly. Malcolm nodded, his eyes distant. He was just 8 years old. He started seeing things, hearing things. At first, we thought it was just his imagination, but it got worse. Much worse. By the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. Anna felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What happened? Malcolm's gaze locked onto hers, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. They took him. Took him. Anna repeated, her voice trembling. Who took him? The spirits, Malcolm said, his voice barely a whisper now. They're not harmless, Anna. They're drawn to children like Dylan. They want something from them. Something they can't take from the rest of us. Anna's knees went weak, and she had to grip the back of a chair to steady herself. But why? Why Dylan? Why your son? Malcolm took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. Because they're trapped. And children like Dylan can see them, can communicate with them. They think that by latching onto these kids, they can find a way out. Anna shook her head, her mind reeling. This was too much. Too much to believe, too much to accept. But deep down, in the darkest corners of her mind, she knew. She had known for a long time. Dylan's nightmares, his sudden outbursts, the way he talked about people who weren't there, it all made sense now. What do we do? She asked, her voice shaking. How do we stop them? Malcolm's expression darkened. We need to find out what they want. If we don't, they'll take Dylan too. Will Anna discover the truth before it's too late? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe and share to uncover the secrets lurking in the shadows. Chapter 3. The shadows grow. The next morning, Anna could barely focus on anything but Malcolm's warning. His words played on a loop in her mind, filling her with a dread that gnawed at her sanity. She kept glancing at her phone, half expecting him to call with more dire news. Dylan was due home that evening, and she needed to prepare. Prepare for what? She wasn't sure, but the idea of him coming back into this house terrified her. She sat on the couch, scrolling through old photos of Dylan on her phone, trying to remember when things had started to change. Was it last winter when he first complained about the strange people watching him while he slept? Or had it been earlier? A passing comment he'd made when he was 4 about the man at the foot of his bed? A sharp knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. Her heart skipped. For a moment, she feared it might be another stranger, someone else with dark news. But when she opened the door, it was her sister, Emily, standing there with Dylan at her side, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Dylan looked pale, his usually bright eyes clouded with something Anna had never seen before, fear. Thanks for watching him, Anna said, trying to keep her voice steady as she bent down to hug Dylan. No problem, Emily replied, though her expression was concerned. He was quiet. Kept saying he didn't feel well. I thought it might be the flu, but he doesn't have a fever. Anna nodded, pulling Dylan close. He smelled of fresh laundry and shampoo, but there was an odd coldness to him, like he'd been standing outside in a winter chill. It's okay, baby. You're home now, she whispered. Dylan didn't say a word, just stared blankly at the hallway behind her, his fingers tightening around her sleeve. Anna followed his gaze, but the hall was empty, just the same as it had always been. Emily watched them both, shifting awkwardly. You sure you're okay, Anna? You look like you haven't slept. I'm fine, Anna lied, straightening up. Just tired. I'll call you later, okay? Emily nodded but gave her a look that said she wasn't convinced. After a few more awkward pleasantries, she left, and the house felt even quieter than before. Anna guided Dylan into the living room and sat him down on the couch. His small hands fidgeted with the edge of his shirt, and he avoided her eyes. "Dylan," she said gently, "are you feeling okay? Did something happen at Aunt Emily's?" He hesitated for a long time, and when he finally looked up at her, his face was ghostly pale. "Mom, they followed me." Anna felt a lump form in her throat. "Who did, sweetie? Who followed you?" "The people," Dylan whispered, his voice trembling. "The ones from my dreams. They followed me to Aunt Emily's house. And now, they're here." Anna's blood ran cold. Her heart pounded so loudly in her chest she thought it might burst. She reached out and stroked his hair, trying to keep her own fear from seeping into her voice. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." Dylan shook his head vigorously. "You can't stop them, Mom. They want me to go with them." Tears pricked Anna's eyes as panic gripped her. "Go where, Dylan? What do they want?" He didn't answer, just kept staring at the hallway as if expecting something, to step out of the shadows. Suddenly, the front door rattled loudly, the sound reverberating through the house like a gunshot. Anna jumped to her feet, her pulse racing. She ran to the door and yanked it open. No one was there. Just the wind. But when she turned back to Dylan, his expression had changed. His wide eyes locked onto something behind her, something unseen. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They're in the house." What will Anna do now that the spirits have entered her home? Subscribe to uncover the dark truth that's about to be revealed. Chapter 4. The Truth Beneath. Anna backed into the living room, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked around wildly, her eyes darting from corner to corner, expecting to see the phantoms Dylan had warned her about. But the room was still, unnaturally still. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator had gone silent. "Where are they?" she whispered, kneeling in front of Dylan. "Can you see them?" He nodded, his eyes wide and terrified, pointing toward the hallway where the shadows seemed to thicken. Anna turned slowly, heart hammering in her chest, but all she saw was darkness. Then, faintly, a whisper. It was so quiet she thought she might have imagined it. "Anna!" Her blood ran cold. That wasn't Dylan's voice. It was something else, something much older, much darker. The air around her seemed to shift, growing denser, heavier. Suddenly, Dylan stood up, his small body rigid as if in a trance. "They're calling you, Mom. They know who you are now." Anna's knees felt weak. "Me? Why?" "They said," Dylan hesitated, looking down at his feet. "They said you've seen them before." A memory flashed in Anna's mind, one she hadn't thought about in years. Her childhood home, a cold night, and the terrifying image of a man standing at the foot of her bed, watching her as she slept. She had convinced herself it was a dream. But now, hearing Dylan speak those words, the memory felt all too real. She stammered, "I don't remember." But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Dylan's voice grew softer, more distant. "They say you're one of them, Mom. That you've always been." Anna's heart lurched in her chest. "One of them? What does that mean?" Before Dylan could answer, the lights in the house flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. Anna grabbed her son, pulling him close, her breath shaky. The whispers grew louder now, surrounding them, filling the air with a suffocating presence. "They're here," Dylan said, his voice eerily calm. Anna's grip tightened around him as the shadows in the hallway began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, swirling like smoke. And from within the darkness, shapes began to emerge, their faces hidden, their forms shifting, unnatural. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. It was as if something had frozen her in place, trapping her in this nightmare. Suddenly, one of the shapes stepped forward, its face emerging from the shadows. Anna gasped, her legs buckling beneath her. It was him. The man from her childhood, the one she had buried deep in her memory, the one she had convinced herself wasn't real. But he was real. And he had come back. What secrets from Anna's past will unravel next? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe now and share to witness the unfolding mystery. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Connection. Anna's body trembled as the figure stepped out of the shadows, the man she had seen so many years ago. He hadn't aged, his face just as pale, his eyes as hollow as they had been when she was a child. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Why him? Why now? The whispers swirled around her, a disorienting cacophony of voices, and Dylan's hand slipped out of hers as he backed away toward the corner of the room. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "they said you know him?" Anna shook her head violently. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, I don't." But the man didn't move. His eyes locked onto hers, cold and unwavering. "Anna," he said softly, his voice a low rasp. "You've always known. You just forgot." She stumbled back, gripping the armrest of the couch for support, her head spinning. Memories she had long buried surged forward, flooding her consciousness. She remembered being a little girl, waking up in the middle of the night, seeing this man, this thing, standing at the foot of her bed. He had whispered to her, told her things, dark things, but when she tried to tell her parents, they never believed her. They said it was just a nightmare, a bad dream, and over time, she believed them. But it wasn't a dream. He was real. He had always been real. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely audible, the words scraping against her throat. The man tilted his head, his lips curling into a faint smile. "You know who I am, Anna. I've watched over you for a long time. We're connected, you and I." "No," Anna breathed, shaking her head again, more forcefully this time. "You're lying. I'm not like you." The man's smile widened, but it was devoid of warmth. "You've felt it your whole life, haven't you? The feeling that you don't quite belong. That something isn't right. You see them, don't you? The others." Anna's heart pounded against her ribcage. She wanted to deny it, to scream that it wasn't true, but deep down, she knew. She had always known. There were moments when she caught glimpses of things that weren't there, heard whispers that no one else could hear. But she had ignored them, convinced herself she was imagining things. Until Dylan. "Why?" she demanded, her voice rising with anger and fear. "Why are you doing this to us? What do you want?" The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're one of the few who can see, Anna. You have the gift, just like your son. But you suppressed it, pushed it away. Now, it's awakening, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Anna's knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, clutching her head. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." The man crouched down in front of her, his face inches from hers. "It's as real as it's ever been, Anna. You can't run from it anymore." She looked up, her vision blurring with tears, but before she could speak, Dylan's voice cut through the tension. "Mom," he said, his voice small, trembling. "They're not going to stop. They want us both." Anna's chest tightened with fear. The air in the room seemed to grow colder, heavier. The shadows on the walls shifted, expanding, swallowing the light. The man stood up slowly, his presence looming over her. "You need to make a choice, Anna. Either you accept who you are, or you let them take him." Anna's blood ran cold. "Take him? Where?" The man smiled again, his eyes dark, unreadable. "To the place between. Where they're trapped. The same place I'll take you if you don't listen." Panic surged through Anna, but before she could speak, Dylan let out a choked gasp. He clutched his chest, his small body trembling violently. "Mom, they're here." Anna scrambled to her feet, pulling Dylan into her arms. She turned to the man, fury in her eyes. "You stay away from him." But the man just shook his head. It's not up to me. It's up to you. Anna's mind raced, the weight of the moment crushing her. What was he asking her to do? What did he mean by accepting who she was? And if she didn't, if she couldn't, what would happen to Dylan? She clutched her son tighter, feeling the pounding of his heart against her chest. She couldn't lose him. Not to this. Not to them. With trembling hands, she looked back at the moon. What do I have to do? The shadows grew darker, and the whispers around her rose to a deafening roar. The man's smile faded, and his expression turned grave. You have to join them, Anna. Become what you were meant to be. What will Anna choose? Will she sacrifice herself to save Dylan, or is there another way? Subscribe now to find out the shocking truth. Chapter 6. The Final Decision. The room seemed to collapse in on itself, the walls warping and distorting as the shadows closed in. Anna's breath came in short, panicked bursts as she held Dylan tightly against her chest. The man stood there, waiting for her answer, his cold eyes piercing through the dim light. Join them, Anna repeated, her voice shaking. What does that mean? How can I save Dylan? The man's expression remained stoic, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes, anticipation, perhaps. You need to open yourself to them, Anna. Embrace your ability, the connection you share with the dead. Only then can you protect your son. Anna swallowed hard, her mind racing. If she did this, if she opened herself up to the spirits, what would happen to her? Would she still be herself, or would she become one of them, lost to the world of the dead forever? You're lying, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You want to take me too? The man smiled faintly. That's not my decision. You've always had the power, Anna. The choice has always been yours. Tears streamed down Anna's face as she looked down at Dylan, his pale face pressed against her chest. He was trembling, his small body rigid with fear. She couldn't let them take him. She couldn't lose him, not after everything they had been through. But what was the alternative? If she refused, would they take him away, leave her alone in this nightmare? Or would they take them both, dragging them into the darkness, never to return? Mom! Dylan's voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. I don't want to go. Anna's heart shattered. She had to make a decision. Now. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The whispers swirled around her, growing louder, more insistent. The shadows pressed in, suffocating, but she focused on Dylan, on the feel of his heartbeat, the warmth of his skin. He was her son, her only family. She couldn't let them take him. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. Okay, I'll do it. The man stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You've made the right choice. Anna's body tensed as a cold, unnatural energy washed over her. The shadows around her pulsed, growing darker, thicker, until they were almost tangible. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, and for a moment, she felt like she was being pulled into a void, an endless, dark abyss where time and reality no longer existed. But then, everything stopped. The shadows receded, the whispers faded, and the room returned to its normal state, as if nothing had ever happened. Anna stood there, panting, her body drenched in sweat, but she felt different, lighter, more aware of the things around her, the spirits, the shadows, the unseen world that had always been there. Dylan looked up at her, his eyes wide with wonder. Mom! Anna knelt down and pulled him into a tight embrace. I'm here, baby, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. The man watched them for a moment before nodding. You've chosen wisely, Anna. Now, you can protect him. You both have a future. Anna looked up at the man, her eyes burning with determination. I don't want to see you again. The man's expression softened, and for the first time, Anna thought she saw a hint of sadness in his eyes. You won't, he said quietly. But remember, The dead are always watching. And with that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Anna and Dylan alone in the quiet, still house. Anna held her son tightly, her heart still racing, but she knew one thing for certain: no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.